everyone, and welcome back to Thread Talks, a podcast where we talk all about the fashion industry and why it might be more important than you think, but less glamorous than it seems. In today's episode, we will certainly not be talking about anything glamorous because it's Halloween today, and what else should a fashion podcast talk about than Halloween costumes? I also apologize if my voice just disappears throughout this episode because for some reason, this whole morning, my voice was completely normal. And then I sat down, started recording, and it was just gone. So I really think that my voice also wanted to contribute to the whole witchy vibe that I'm going for today for this episode. So I apologize, but yes, I wanted to record it today. And I mean, I don't know why my voice is gone because I don't have a sore throat or anything. So it is what it is. Anyway, as I already said, today we will be focusing on the evolution of Halloween costumes because at least for me and people around me, it feels like Halloween costumes are really the most important part of Halloween. I think that is just what it is for adults, and to be honest, we will get to it that it indeed is one of the most important things for adults in today's version of Halloween. Anyway, we will get to that later. Now to the beginning of Halloween. Halloween originates from a Celtic festival of Samhain. I really hope I said this right because I found two slightly different pronunciations online, but I will write it for those who are watching. I will write it right here. Anyway, this festival was meant to mark the end of summer and the celebration of harvest that they had during the summer and the beginning of the darker half of a year, winter, autumn, which was also often associated with death. For those who don't know, we are talking about girls that lived 2,000 years ago, mostly in the area of Ireland, the UK and northern France. During the celebrations, people often had feasts and lighted bonfires where they would burn corpses and animals as a gift to the gods, hoping for a fruitful harvest next season or next year. This night was also believed to be the time where the world of living and the world of death becomes one, and so in order to ward off evil spirits, people would dress in animal heads and animal skin. So this marks the beginning of not only Halloween but Halloween costumes as well, so we can tell that they are an essential part of the holiday. And the funny thing is that apparently they also used to do that the people would prank each other and then blame it on evil spirits, which is, if it's true, it's quite ironic because that is something that almost ruined Halloween, and well, it didn't ruin it, but it kind of shaped it, but we will be talking about this later. If you're neither American nor British, like I am, you might be celebrating something called All Saints' Day, which falls on November 1st. This was originally a Christian festival that was initiated in British Islands in the 9th century, and later on was adopted by the Catholic Church. And it was essentially a day where they would celebrate All Saints of the Catholic Church. The celebration would start with a feast on the night before, which would be called All Hallows Eve. Later, Halloween. So this is how the 31st October became what we now know Halloween. And it was essentially really similar to the original pagan festival with, again, a lot of the feast and the costumes. At those times, I didn't really find what the costumes were like, but from what I found, or more like from what I didn't find about this period, I would assume that they were still the same as they were at the beginning. So animal hats, animal skin. The change came in the medieval England when people started to dress in the costumes symbolizing the souls of dead, and they would go from door to door asking for a soul cake, which was meant to be a cake which was very sweet and had a cross on it. And they were doing this in the behalf of the dead that they were dressed up as. This was called souling, and I guess that all of you have noticed that it's very similar to what we know now as trick or treat, and we will get to this later. But now we are getting to the 15th century, where people started to dress as the evil spirits of winter and demons, which is a significant change because up till now Halloween was centered around death, while now it started to be a bit more spooky as we know it today. Now people dressed up in those costumes would again go from door to door, but this time they would recite verses and sing songs or folk plays in exchange for food, which was called mumming. You probably noticed that so far we've been talking about the UK and Europe in general. And for me, as for someone who is not from a country that celebrates Halloween, well, I mean, we do now, but I think that's only been a thing for the past maybe 5 years, because when I was a child, Halloween was not a thing. I mean, me and my friend would always have little Halloween parties together, but it was never something that was widely celebrated in my country. And it always felt like a very American holiday. So for me, it was quite a surprise to learn later on in life that it actually comes from the United Kingdom, especially Ireland and Scotland. So how did Halloween even get to America? Well, as a lot of other things that got to America, through immigrants. Although they did know Halloween in colonial New England, it wasn't very celebrated because of the rigid Protestant belief system that was in the country at the time. So it wasn't really until the 19th century when the Irish and Scottish immigrants began to arrive to America and introduce Halloween as a holiday when it started to be celebrated in America too. And Americans really loved the holiday, especially the fact that it was centered around death, and they really respected the pagan roots. And at the time, the goal was to be in full-on disguise. They would make costumes at home with everything they had, including sheets, including makeup. I saw a picture that I will put up here with a guy wearing quite literally a napkin over his face, but it's actually really terrifying outfit. So that was also another thing. It was still about being really scary. By the 1920s and 1930s, the holiday became so popular in America that they would hold parades and they would hold masquerades. And at the time, it was really a community sort of holiday. I've read that it was probably also because of the timing when it was between summer and Christmas holiday, so it was an opportunity to meet up with your friends, meet up with your family before the holiday starts. And a lot of the times they wouldn't hold house parties all that much as we do now, but they would rather have the parties in like communal areas and rented restaurants or rented places, rented properties. So it was very much about community back then. And during the times we had another thing, which was rise of Hollywood, which significantly changed the way that people dressed for Halloween. We had the pin-up girls for women, and for children we also had Walt Disney that was just starting. And this is where a costume company, Ben Cooper Inc. comes in. And it is very important because originally they saw the potential in Walt Disney, in Mickey Mouse and Snow White, and started to make costumes based on these characters because they predicted correctly that children will want to dress as them. Now I also want to mention that those masks or those costumes weren't like we know them today, because if you think about Mickey Mouse costume, you usually just think about makeup and the actual outfit or the clothing. However, before, Halloween really was about the anonymity and about going full on and covering your face. So when I say that they created masks, I mean quite literal masks. Another type of costumes that became popular during this time were the funny costumes. However, unfortunately, those often included blackface and redface. I will not be talking about why it's so problematic in detail, because it is not something that I think I am really entitled to talk about, and I think there are a lot of people that are more knowledgeable and that will educate you on this a lot better than I would. But I did think that it's very important to mention it because it is an important part of the American culture, of the Black history, of the Native American history. And unfortunately, it is something that was happening. It was part of the evolution of the costumes. Anyway, moving on. At this time, Halloween was for both adults and children, but it was more targeted on adults than children. However, that changed in 1950s. Do you remember how at the beginning I mentioned that if it's true that people were pranking each other and then blaming it on evil spirits, it's quite ironic because it changed the Halloween that we know now? Well, that is because vandalism became such a problem on Halloween that they quite literally called it the Halloween problem. And in order to stop the criminality, or decrease it at least, the national officers decided to recast Halloween and turn it into something for kids. Again, the costume company that I mentioned, Ben Cooper Inc., really helped with this because, as I said, they saw the potential of Walt Disney and of the Hollywood in general. And at this time, they produced 70 to 80% of all the costumes that everyone in America was buying. So they were very significant. And as I said, they were the first ones who really started creating the costumes for kids as well. So that's why Halloween for a period of time became a holiday for kids rather than for adults. However, after the World War II, the television brought pop culture to the homes, and people started to want to dress like superheroes and comic characters. And in the 1960s, adults started to dress up again. Even for them, the most popular costumes were the characters that they saw in the movie and in the television. And we saw a big revolution here because for the first time ever, they started to drop the masks and started to show their face, which, if you think about it, is something that no one really does anymore. Not a lot of people wear masks. I think usually it's sort of a lazy move. You know, it's sort of like you don't know what to be for Halloween. It's a last minute costume. You just go to a costume shop and buy some sort of mask and you go. But if you think about it, this is really something new that we started doing, because until the 1960s, the mask was essential. And at this time, we really dropped the need for a scary costume and started to dress rather in a funny way, as I said multiple times now, as different TV characters and film characters. and Halloween was no longer an exhibition of terrifying costumes. However, this only lasted for a decade, and in the 1970s, with the rising popularity of Halloween horror movies, popularity of the spooky outfits came back. The following decade, 1980s, also became very significant for the gay community, because up till now homosexuality was illegal, and even if it wasn't illegal, it was seen as something that is something to be discriminated for. So obviously no one really wanted to admit to it. But Halloween became the time of a year where everyone was dressing up, and it was a time where gay people could express themselves. One could pretend as something that they aren't, and in this case, gay people could express themselves for what they truly are without being prosecuted. When I was doing research for this episode, I also stumbled across quite a lot of articles talking about how gay community contributed to the popularization of provocative outfits for Halloween, but I genuinely don't think that's what it was. But I do see how at the time it was seen as something provocative, and I guess I hope that's what the articles meant, is that the gay community started to use Halloween as a holiday to provoke and to point out things that are wrong in a society, in a sense, through the fashion. But I wouldn't say that it's their fault that we now have sexy nuns and sexy police officers and, you know, all the overly sexualized outfits. And actually, I have not seen anyone talking about why or when those came to trend, because obviously they are quite big till this day, at least in England where I live. And if I should say what I personally believe started this trend, it was probably the millennium, where obviously we saw Paris Hilton being all sexy, and we started to have this sort of provocative, sexy symbols that we didn't really see previously. So I would say that this is what it is. In an article for CNN, I wrote this quote by sociology researcher at London College of Fashion, Anna Marie Almila, I hope that's her name, and she said Halloween costumes have gone from disguise to full-on exhibition. Today it's one big capitalist celebration completely detached from the Christianity and paganism and more centered around expressing people's fantasies, which also explains its success globally. She then also criticizes that we aren't as creative anymore with the costumes, and that we create a lot of waste because obviously everyone just buys a costume that's already pre-made and no one goes and, you know, uses what they already have at home. But to say that we're not creative with the costumes, I mean, in this sense, completely, yes, I completely agree. But we are a lot more creative with the costumes today than we were, for 1,000 years, when it was literally just scary costumes, and now it can be whatever. And I believe, and from what I read, you know, throughout this whole research that I've done around on this topic, I did notice one thing. Like with anything else, fashion really reflects the society, and this includes the Halloween costumes. Halloween costumes evolved with the society. When people believed that evil spirits will come down on Earth, they dressed as evil spirits themselves to protect themselves and to scare the evil spirits off. When people believed that blackface is funny, they dressed up as blackface. Now people want to dress up as fun characters and, you know, to dress up as someone else. And it's just really reflecting on what society is today and what it was during the time. So to say that today's version of Halloween is wrong, well, it's not wrong. It is different from the paganism, but it is good. In some senses, we have evolved in a better direction. In some senses, we evolve in the wrong directions. For example, yes, we create a lot more pollution with the Halloween costumes, and it's a big problem, but the evolution of Halloween costumes is very natural, and it just reflects the evolution of us as human beings.